Hi everyone, my name is Eva. I am a product manager in Product Board. And for those of you who don't know what Product Board is, we make software for product managers. And my job specifically is to think about roadmaps, which is part of the product that product managers use to plan their work and of course track the progress. So my job involves thinking about how to do that job the best. And today, I want to talk to you specifically about collaboration with engineering teams, because that's something, of course, as product managers, we do it a lot, but I'm particularly passionate about it because I've been, product manager for a while now, and I got to learn a lot about the topic. I have a great engineering manager, so that, of course, helps. And today, I want to share some learnings, what we learned along the way, on how this could work. But I actually want to start with asking if you are, what kind of product people or software people are you? Are you engineers? Raise your hand if you're an engineer. All right. And are you a product manager? Okay, so I have more engineers than product managers. And anything else? UX? Okay, designers. Whew, forgot, yeah. All right, cool. And are you engineering managers or engineers? Engineers? Engineering managers? Some? Okay, cool. Well, hopefully, you'll learn today how we do it, what we think is the best practice, and what hopefully you can introduce in your teams as well. All right, so let me start with a story. So imagine an organization, very theoretical exercise, right, where product and engineering work in a way that they have hard handovers, right? Product does something, hands over to the engineering, and they basically stop communicating. There is very little transparency between the different roles, right? There's very little context sharing. So, product manager doesn't share their context. Engineering, they feel like they are actually battling the product in some way. And of course, there's a lack of ownership, right? If something goes wrong, one party blames the other. Maybe you've experienced this, maybe not. But you can imagine that the outcome of such a scenario is that there are very much misaligned goals. There is delays and rework happening. And there's inefficient resource use delays and increased costs because we can do products that no one cares about or no one knows how to use. So imagine a different scenario, which is that product and engineering collaborate together all the way from quarterly planning to the sprint execution. They have each other backs, so when one party messes up, the second party picks up, and there is very much shared context between the parties, right? And you can imagine the outcome or the consequence of this is that you have effective planning and prioritization process, you have faster delivery of high-quality, market-aligned products, and product engineering actually like each other. So what I want to tell you today, how to actually get to this positive scenario in your teams. All right, so how do we actually get there? So today I want to talk a bit about how we work. I want to talk you through the different planning phases because I can, of course, spend hours talking in theory what is the role of each person in the team. But I believe, it actually comes down to the execution and the processes that you set up in a team that allow for that effective collaboration. So I'll talk about the quarterly planning, initiative breakdown, sprint planning, evaluation, and then some tips and tricks. All right, let's just make this smaller. All right, so to give you some of the context of how we actually work, you might work in the same way, but I know not all product teams work this way. So every team in Product Board, we have what we call the team leadership. In every team, we have a product manager, we have a designer, and a tech lead or engineering manager. I might use these terms a bit interchangeably today, but it's like someone who leads the engineering team, right? Product manager is not a line manager of engineers. The tech lead or the engineering managers. So that's how we staff the teams. And in general, we try to go by the book, the Marty Kagan theory, which says that design is responsible for, let's say, the desirability, meaning that customers know how to use the product, Engineering is responsible for the feasibility, so we know how to deliver the product, and product management is responsible for the viability, e.g. meaning building the right products. That's the theory, right? But it all comes down to how we actually work day to day. So that's what I want to talk about more than just this theory. But of course, ideally, it's not that, I don't care about the feasibility at all. So ideally, we all share ownership of all the three. But yeah, in ideal world, we divide the competencies like this. All right, so I want to walk you through a bit about how our quarter looks like, because it might be very very abstract unless I talk about how we actually work day in, day out. So we work on a quarterly planning basis. So every quarter we have a big planning. Then we do initiative scoping. I'll talk a bit more about that. Of course, then we run in sprints, which is 2 weeks for us, and then we do some kind of evaluation in the quarter or after each big initiative. So I'll start with the quarterly planning. So with quarterly planning, I always try to give you step by step how we do it. So we start obviously with setting up goals with measurable key results, which might sound obvious, but the way how we do it, we try to do it in a way that each team has a very clear goals that are shared between product and engineering, right? So my engineering manager is involved right from the start. He knows, in my case, it's he knows very well what are the goals that we wanna have. And then when it actually comes to collecting the initiatives that will meet these objectives, he also needs to submit not only the product, but we also submit the technical engineering initiatives. After that, we usually select the right prioritization framework, right? So that bit depends on the type of work we do. Like right now, we use a lot the pain versus friction. Actually, it's supposed to be pain versus frequency, not pain versus pain. But pain versus frequency means that how painful is a certain or how painful is it to not have certain feature in the product, and frequency is how often customers get to experience this pain. After that, we have a prioritized list under each objective, and then start the rough estimation of top initiatives, which give us a rough idea what makes cut for the roadmap. So this might be extremely theoretical, so I actually have some pictures to show you what I'm talking about. So what I mentioned before, right? So at the beginning of the quarter, we have some kind of objectives. I didn't use our actual objectives. I use example. Imagine that I work for a digital bank, right? These are not actually product board objectives. So we could have team objectives such as enhanced loan offerings, right? Which is fairly vague. The objective itself doesn't have to have the goal in it, but we have let's say, key results that have the goal in them. And what we do, we come up with a list of initiatives that could possibly fulfill these objectives, right? So like if my goal was to enhance loan offerings, I could, for example, build loan comparison tool, right? And then, so I collect the list. We do some kind of prioritization. Here I mentioned reach versus impact, but you can imagine doing whatever it needs to do. And that from the prioritization, you have some kind of list of priorities, right? From P0 all the way to, let's say, P3. Of course, the next step is that the engineering has to give high-level estimates. So the T-shirts mean sprints. I think M is 1 sprint of work for 1 squad. And of course, this is where, this is what we actually struggled with in the beginning. So if you're an engineer, you might already feel uncomfortable giving high-level estimate to something that's very vague. Maybe you just know the name of the initiative, which definitely was a learning process for us because I wanted the engineering to give me estimates. They were asking questions to which I didn't have answers. So there we struggled a little bit. But what we did, I had to push engineering to embrace the uncertainty because I'm not going to have all the answers until we do a proper discovery. Maybe it's good to know that it's not that we discover all of these initiatives up front, right? It's more like we have objective, we think about what kind of initiatives we could do to fulfill that objective, and only after we prioritize the initiatives, we do actually discovery and break down these initiatives. So it can get very uncomfortable, but then we learned that you can either fix the time or you can fix the scope on these initiatives, and what we usually do, we fix the time. right? So we say, okay, something like build comparison tools, there's Excel estimate, so that's 2-3 sprints of work, right? And if it turns out that it's more than 3 sprints of work, we either can cut the scope or we can prolong the time, depending, it's case-by-case basis, and those things happen. But yeah, we have to work around that. So that's me as a product manager. I do the prioritization, right? And the engineering manager comes, he does the scoring. And what we do as a next step, we plot the initiatives on a timeline. Then we usually find out that the initiatives with like a lower level of priorities, they don't make the cut. So we communicated they made a cut. We focus on, let's say, the high P0s in the beginning of the quarter, make sure those are delivered, and then we always communicate also to the leadership that if something is P3 at the end of the quarter, that might just not happen. Sometimes it does happen that we actually manage to do more work than we promised, but that's, of course, not always the case. Yeah, so that's our planning. One important note that I could, if you take anything from this talk, I would like it to be this one, which is that you can fix time or you can fix scope, but you can't fix both. And leadership will, of course, want you to, but if you have a bit enlightened leadership, you should try to, make this very obvious to them. What we usually do, we try to fix the time. Sometimes, of course, we also have to fix the scope, but you cannot possibly have both unless you do like a total waterfall, which I'm assuming not many of you do. So if I have to mention some best practices for, let's say, the whole quarterly planning, it is to collaborate from the start, right? So immediately when I have the objectives set by my leadership, we meet with the engineering manager and we basically do entire prioritization together. He puts some engineering initiatives, I put the product initiatives. Of course, I have more say into what's more important for the customers, but yeah, he has a very good idea why certain initiatives were prioritized and what are the technical constraints, and we take that into account as well. The prioritization logic should be extremely transparent, right? So even he should be able to say why we prioritize certain initiatives. So be it that they were important for a certain customer, or they score high on the prioritization formula, whatever. Like, it should be super transparent, the way how we got to the list. Again, I can't emphasize it enough that you can fix the time or you can fix the both, but you can fix the scope, but not both. And maybe one last thing we do is, of course, when I say that you can fix the time or scope, there will be always initiatives that we kind of know what will be in the scope, and there will be initiatives which are extremely vague, right? And for the extremely vague initiative, just we plan more time. That's how we usually go around that. All right, so that was quarterly planning. I have to speed up a little bit. So then we have initiative scoping. Initiative scoping is basically a process where, once we did the quarterly planning, we actually have to get into the initiatives and try to break them down and do discovery. If it's a problem that we don't even know the solution to, we try to do what we call the double diamond, which means that we do first a problem discovery and then the solution discovery. But often, we actually know the problem quite well because we've been in the team for a while, so we have a good understanding of the problem. So then we do more of like the solution discovery. And typically, PM should be responsible for driving the problem discovery, but more and more I try to push the designer and engineering manager or a tech lead of a particular initiative to do the solution discovery, right? I try to take the back wheel and push them into doing the solution discovery more and more. So when we talk about initiative breakdown, I will take example of the build loan comparison tools. So at the end of this process, you would have the initiative broken down into concrete features. Again, I would prioritize them usually in a Moscow style, like must-have, should have, nice to have. Again, the must-have should for sure happen in that initiative, and then should have, depending if you still have time, the nice to have never happen, of course. But we can, put them there anyway. Here, we also often look at like what some of our biggest customers want, so that would be another criteria we would take into account at this point. For each initiative, it's super important that each initiative has like a tech lead. So that is the person basically driving the initiative, writing ACs, and so on, together with the designer. So what we do at this point, so at the beginning of the quarter, I would give them like a initiative brief. I would try to outline, what's new in the initiative, what problem does it solve, target audience, and so on, and the open questions. But that's what they run with, right? That's enough for them to start a solution discovery, and then ideally at this point, the process should be taken over by the designer and the tech lead. My best practice is try to involve engineers early in the process, because the more you involve them and they build the confidence to drive the solution discovery, then of course they can then, make it easier for me, right? Because then I can step back and focus on other things. I would actually mention specifically the last point. I think one of the hard lessons we've learned that we made some decision on a meeting, and then someone comes 2 weeks in, 2 months in, even a year in, and ask us why we made that decision. So every decision anyone makes needs to be communicated in Slack, so you can just resend that Slack message. Remember this time we made that decision? So that's one of the best practices for me. So the next step, of course, is a sprint planning. With my engineering team, we got to the point that I don't do sprint planning anymore. Sprint planning is done entirely by the engineering. Of course, I have some say in it if I feel that some features should have a priority, but my tech lead does the sprint planning himself. He knows what we plan in the quarter, he knows the priorities, and then it's up to the tech lead to actually create a tactical plan. Right, our sprint plan could look something like this. Each team we actually operate in squads, which means that each squad should be fully staffed, so like back end, front end, and each squad should be able to complete initiative end to end. So we basically have like 2 teams in one, in this sense. But then it's up to the tech lead to plan it in a way that it's always fully staffed, and they can deliver the initiative. Second. One thing I would definitely recommend, so it took us a while, but we developed this feature template where we make also very explicit who needs to write what, right? So I typically write a problem opportunity and the user stories. But the acceptance criteria, I think this is my success as a PM, that the acceptance criteria in our teams are written by the tech leads, not me. So if you don't do that in your teams, it's definitely possible. So if you want to make your life easier, it is possible. I've mentioned, this is actually more best practices for the engineers, right? Because when I say set clear sprint goals, I'm not the one actually setting the clear sprint goals, but the engineers are. Of course, the challenge that we have to do is to keep the sprints balanced, right? Because, of course, we have the back and front end 2 streams, so we have to always make sure that they are properly staffed and supported. We plan buffer for the unknowns. And what I'm particularly interested in is progress towards specific goals, like beta releases. All right, I need to probably speed up a little bit. All right, evaluation. That is, I think, one thing. It's often forgotten, but I think it's quite crucial for someone like a PM to do that. So what we typically do, we evaluate each initiative. Then we again do quarterly evaluation, which could include stuff like competitive teardown with the team. So for example, yesterday we've ended the quarter, and part of the quarterly evaluation was that I sat the entire team down. We took our competitors and spent 2 hours looking through all the competitive tools and evaluate them against our tool. This is just an example how I typically end the quarter, right? So sometimes we do the 30, 60, 90 evaluation, so for really big initiatives. But what I always try to do is to bring back the customer feedback to the developers, right? Because then they can see it and they can understand how they can further improve. What I can also, of course, do sometimes if I have a call snippets, like we record all our customer calls, so I wouldn't even share calls with them so they understand the feedback that the customers have firsthand. Maybe one last thing. As a PM, I also don't view only my role as telling them what to do, but also, of course, supporting them. So I think every time we have a success, we have a big release, I try to, for example, bring cake or try to really be there for them and celebrate bring it back home that we've released something big. So that's a tip for PMs. All right, so to perhaps summarize what I told you today, if you took nothing from this, it's fine, but there's just a few points if you don't take anything else. So if you're an engineer and don't do it now, ask your PMs to join customer calls. I think it's extremely important that you build that customer empathy, you understand who are your customers, how they work. If you're engineering manager, then absolutely invest time to really get to know the product, right? Like it brings me like very, very big joy that my own engineering manager challenges me sometimes because he knows the product so well. He can actually be that partner with me and like we can discuss even product decisions because he knows the product super, super well. Of course, it helps that he actually does use the product himself, right? But even if you don't use the product, please, please, please have the deep knowledge of the product. If you're PM, always share positive sentiment from the product to the engineers, right? They often like to hear that their work had impact. And think hard about what you can do to offload work from your plate. So, think about if you really need to do bug prioritization, or perhaps engineers could do it. Think about if you really need to do the sprint planning, or perhaps your engineering manager could do the sprint planning for you. And do you really need to write the ACs, or perhaps your initiative leaders or tech leads could write the ACs? So, my challenge to you. Maybe our master tip is that every Monday we have a planning session with a trio, so designer, engineering manager, and me, and all of us outline the list of priorities for that week, right? So I would outline stuff like I need to do the go-to-market document. He would write, I don't know, I need to do technical strategy. So we would all write it down. And if we see that one person has a lot on that person's plate, we actually try to help each other, right? So it could be that that week my engineering manager is busy, so I'll take over the team ceremonies, which I usually don't moderate. If he sees that I'm busy, I have a lot of work to do, he asks, how can he help me? So we really try to make it, in this sense, a team game, but that sometimes means that product manager does stuff that normally engineering manager would do, and engineering manager does stuff that product manager would normally do. And ideally, don't blame each other if things don't work out, because they will not. All right, I think we have 1 more minute. Okay, so I just wanted to summarize everything I've talked about. So I talked about aligning product and engineering teams on shared OKRs to drive the results. I've talked about ensuring transparent prioritization to maximize impact and resource efficiency. I've talked about assigning clear ownership early to accelerate delivery and accountability, assigning ownership to the initiatives, collaborating on the initiative scope with the tech lead, regularly reviewing progress, and evaluate completed work to improve future performance and drive growth. Thank you. If you want to talk more, this is a link to my LinkedIn. You can just add me, of course, ask questions if you need to. Yeah?
Can you please share what your tech leads typically write into the acceptance criteria? Because if you, as the product manager, write user stories, then I would expect that those user stories are actually the acceptance criteria.
Good question. So the level I would go into is that I would outline high-level functionality, right? I would say, as a user, I want to be able to add card attributes on the card. It's a very specific thing. I didn't think of anything. I want to group my data based on some kind of swim lanes so I can slice and dice my data. So I would keep it pretty high level, but then they would be the ones really outlining the specific acceptance criteria when it comes to how it should behave, for which entities in the system it should behave this way. It should include analytics, the acceptance criteria should include permissions, things like that. So they have a whole checklist that they have to include in the ACs. And then we would take those ACs and test during the sessions against those ACs. Yeah. And maybe one thing I didn't mention, so typically I keep it very high level, right? Then the designer comes and they make design in their design file, and very often it happens that we actually contradict each other. So the best tech leads, what they do is they really read everything out. They put us in one room, make us agree, and then write the ACs. So the star STLs would do that.
Okay, great, thank you. We are kind of running out of time, so I'm gonna use just 2 questions, 2 most voted questions we have in Eventy. Customer feedback. Have you ever tried to connect a team with a customer? If yes, how it went?
Great question. I didn't mention that, but yeah, I very regularly invite engineers to the customer calls. If it's like a more general call, then it's usually like the engineering manager. If it's like a call regarding particular initiatives, then it could be also engineer that is leading that initiative. I think it goes very well. They always ask. Of course, my calls are like 6, 7 p.m. often because our customers are in the US. So then they would not join that. But if it's during normal working hours, actually they're very excited to join. So then we have to actually limit the number of people on the call because we also don't want to bring 4 engineers.
Thank you. And the second one is, so you are basically involved in the level of quarterly goals and epics, and anything below that is up to tech lead. What do you check on a sprint basis?
So I give the priorities, right? We agree on the priorities, but then I'm also involved in like the initiative breakdown, right? So I still basically say the scope per each initiative, but what I'm not involved in like decision of like, for example, the sequence, because then the sequence often depends on like the front end, back end balance, and like I think he's perfectly, I trust him that he will do that the best. On a sprint, I of course check the progress. I ask, how we're progressing certain initiatives because then I take over and I do the whole go-to-market part. So I need to be willing to be tight on deadlines as well with them.
Okay, thank you. There was a lot of other questions, but no worries. Eva will be there for you at Speaker's Corner, which is just outside of this room to the left. She will be there for a couple of minutes, so you can enjoy some discussions, and we will switch to another talk. Eva, thank you.
Thank you.